Tiana S. Clark is the audacious commander of her life, always having the audacity to make her own way, defy the odds, and follow her inner wisdom. She empowers women to do the same through her life-changing program, Driver's Seat, and she empowers girls through her Hollywood award-winning tween web series known as So She Circle. Tiana S. Clark is a United States Air Force veteran. Thank you for your service. A mom of four, an entrepreneur, creator, and executive producer, multi-award winner, a wife, a teacher, a nonprofit founder, world traveler, corporate tech leader, and mentor. And yet, she will quickly tell you, I am not Superwoman. I am simply a woman who had the audacity to empower herself. Every woman can do the same. Tiana grew up orphaned in the murder capital of the world and harnessed her innate power to change her trajectory. She's climbed the ladder in two fortunate top 10 corporations over a span of 15 years, leading an international acquisition at Valero Energy Corporation and building the first ever and best in class national services sales university at Microsoft. She's created her own positions, not once, but twice. She's led portfolios of millions and billions in revenue over the years and has liberated herself from so-called imposter syndrome. As a former military intelligence sergeant, she's flown an F-15 fighter jet over England, briefed international generals at the Pentagon, led U.S. war target strategy, and won Airman of the Year, the most prestigious award, meaning she was the #1 airman out of thousands at her UK Air Base. VodCast community, please do me great honor in helping to welcome our wonderful guest co-host today by sharing some love, whether it's clapping of your hands, snapping of your fingers, placing some emojis that's through the Zoom features, words of affirmation into the chat, whatever your way is. Let's welcome our wonderful guest co-host today, Tiana Clark. Tiana, unmute yourself and just greet this audience in your own way. Let us know more about you, things that we cannot know just by reading your impressive bio. I told her at the beginning that I'm a little intimidated. I mean, I am in the presence of someone who has flown an F-15 fighter jet. Really? Anyway, Tiana, welcome us in your own way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And then we sip champagne on the tarmac afterwards. Hey.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. If you all read the topic for today, we're talking about stop waiting. And so I'm going to use that as the topic to just go a little bit deeper into my own life, as Dr. Nika asked. I think the reason why that's such an important topic for me is due to my background. So you touched on, I grew up in the murder capital of the world. And that wasn't an easy environment to grow up in. I was also a very, what they call bossy little girl, which turns out is just raw and immature leadership skills, actually. But, I was one of those girls, I had a little bit of an attitude problem, all of that. And I remember one day, my mom, she dropped me off to school. I was in 6th grade. And, she said, I love you. And I just slammed the door, rolled my eyes and went in the school building. And then she didn't come pick me up that day. And I was trying to figure out what's going on. Where's my mother? And it took until 3:00 a.m. about the next morning when I was told that she had been murdered. And my father wasn't in my life. So growing up in the murder capital of the world, being orphaned, I knew at a very young age that no one is coming to save me. I have to save myself. And that is where this comes from. It's what I've carried throughout my entire career. Is why I joined the military. I love to tell you that I wanted to give my life for my country. But I joined the military because I wanted to escape my environment. I wanted to see the world. I felt that there was a lot more out there for me. And so I took a chance on myself and I went and did that. And so it's been all about, for me, having the audacity to follow that inner wisdom, to do what you think is best for you, and to know that no one is coming to save you. So you have to save yourself. And that is why the work that I do is to empower women and girls and people to know that, and to empower themselves.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing a bit more of your story. I am even more impressed as we continue to get acquainted, and as you've shared with us just in your opening remarks. I find that so often when we introduce ourselves, our identity becomes so wrapped up in our credentials and what we've done, and less about our experiences that are maybe those private identities that that shapes really who we are and how we see the world. And so I'm always appreciative when our guests co-hosts are willing to go a little deeper to allow us to know them on a deeper level. So thank you so much. So I want to just jump right in. Why do you think that we are waiting, and what creates this behavior?
So I think we are waiting. When I talk about waiting, I mean that when I look at our lives and our jobs and our careers, a lot of us are waiting for the right circumstances, the right degree to come along, or the right person to come along, the right sponsor, the right DEI program, the right policies, the right job, right? We're waiting. We're waiting for permission. We're waiting. And a lot of this comes from, but let me take a step back. We're waiting, and we're experiencing things, though, like microaggressions, exclusions, we're getting passed over, we're not getting the upward mobility, and we're waiting for something magical to happen to fix this. We have an expectation for fairness, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having that expectation, except that the world isn't fair. Some of us have validation issues, myself included. I used to have validation issues, right? We need this job with this company so we can be validated amongst our peers and on LinkedIn and for ourselves. We have the happy to be here syndrome, especially if we're first generation or second generation corporate citizens. Why ask for more? Historically, we haven't been invited into these spaces. So we're here now. Why ask for more than that? We're just happy to be here, right? We want to be liked. We don't want to be perceived as a threat. We want to keep our heads down, hope we get noticed, hope our good work goes noticed, right? And so we wait. We're waiting for these things. And I'm saying, don't wait for validation. Don't wait for fairness. Don't wait to be noticed, and don't wait for permission.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I've heard just maybe once or twice someone else talk about this whole syndrome of, look, I've arrived, I'm just happy to be here, so I'm going to sit quiet and just take whatever comes my way. So I love that you've amplified that. No, there is more, and we need to give ourselves permission to recognizing that we deserve the full worth of our value. And just because it may be the first time that we have sat in that seat or been in that space and that environment, don't just settle. And so I appreciate you bringing that to the conversation. So you talk about self-empowerment as it relates to DEI as an opportunity, of course, as we've been hearing you articulate, to stop waiting. I want you to continue to stay in that vein a little bit more. Tell us more about what you see people waiting on precisely.
So let's take, for example, we think about self-empowerment and what people are waiting on precisely. So let's say, for example, we just talked about, just being happy to be there. You want to do good work. You hope you get noticed. A lot of times what I see, especially in corporate spaces, is what we really want is we want the opportunities. We want the upward mobility, but we're not advocating for ourselves to get there. So we're waiting and we're hoping that someone else will notice us and promote us or give us that upward mobility. And a lot of times when we do that, we're disappointed when they don't, because we haven't used our voice. We haven't advocated for ourselves.
So your philosophy, Tiana, is not that we shouldn't have expectations of others who are in positions of influence to help create these pathways of upward mobility and these opportunities for full success to be realized, but you see it as a both and. We also need to make sure that we feel empowered to also help control the outcomes that we desire for ourselves. Is that what I'm hearing you share with us today?
Absolutely. Listen, to your point, companies definitely have a responsibility, right? They have a responsibility to first believe wholeheartedly in the importance of inclusion and belonging and diversity and professional development for their employees, and to be able to offer, right, the programs and all these things in place for them to be able to advance their careers. They also have a responsibility towards ensuring the psychological safety of their employees, right? And to have a no tolerance with negative behaviors. I'm not taking that away from them at all. They absolutely have that responsibility. But what I'm saying is, right, we all know that, let's just be honest, we're not going to be in these perfect environments at all times where all of those stars align and things just happen the way they should naturally happen fairly, right? And so we also have a responsibility to ourselves to make sure that we're playing our part in that.
I love it. And you're a great model of this. When I read your bio, I shared with the audience that you've created your own position, not once, but twice. And so tell us about that experience.
Wow. Okay. So the first experience, so we talked about some of these kind of microaggressive, exclusionary environments. And so I remember early in my corporate career, I came in the door out of the military where things were so very different, right? And now I'm in these environments where people, they went to 4-year colleges, or, they've got master's degrees and all these things by now. My degree was pieced together like a quilt. I was taking classes online while deployed for war, right? And everybody's got these fancy college plaques on their walls and the fancy suits. And I come in from, right, you've heard about my background, right? And so I remember being in these meetings where I would have a really great idea of a path we should take, right? Or a different way, a different perspective of looking at things. But the people sitting around the table who did not look like me, it's like they thought they didn't understand what I was saying. But then the white man sitting next to me would repeat the same thing. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's experienced this. And they're like, oh, that's genius. And I'm like, really? Really? So what happened though, is I started internalizing that. Like, something is wrong with me. It's my background. Maybe I need to be better at articulating myself in these corporate environments, right? So I started internalizing that, not realizing that there were a lot of biases and things at play. So it took me some time to kind of talk myself out of that and to say, no, there's nothing wrong with you, right? But since there's something about your appearance that makes it difficult for people to hear what you're saying, we will show them better than we can tell them. And so I just made sure, like, everything that I did was just excellent. All of my projects knocked it out of the park. I'm making relationships all across the business, outside of the IT group where I worked, et cetera. And then one day I realized, so I'm hired into this role, right? And my job was to train, it was a big change management campaign for a company that had multiple locations all across the United States. And so I'm hired in to ensure that we get through the change management program. I'm doing the training, et cetera. And then I just had an epiphany one day. I'm like, wait a minute, what happens when I train all these locations? What happens to my job? What am I doing next? And I started really thinking about it and planning for that and saying, okay, what are the business needs? What are the gaps that I see? And I had just started working through that and kind of created my own little document and things. And then one day, we had a new VP. Now, this VP was new to the organization. He had a very authoritative leadership style that caused us to have a lot of low morale issues where people were afraid to speak around him. It wasn't the best environment, right? And so anyway, one day there was a charity luncheon coming up. And his executive assistant, she's like, we've got an extra seat at this charity luncheon if you want to go. And I was like, sure, I'll go to the charity luncheon. I like those kind of things, galas and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. So I go and I intentionally sit right next to the VP. Okay, this is the scary guy. I sit right next to him. And he reaches for my bread. And I said, "You just gonna grab my bread like that?" And he was like, "No, that's my bread." I said, "No, it's mine." He said he did this trick with his fingers that shows, which is your bread and which is your drink.
Oh, yeah.
He said,
Mm-hmm.
"No, and I was like, "Oh, you're right." That's your bread. But I think he said, "Wow, like she had the audacity to challenge me, though." So we get back to the office and he says, "If you could have any position in this organization, what would it be?" And I said, "Well, that's the problem. It doesn't exist." And he said, "Well, help me understand that it doesn't exist." I said, "No." And I just explained to him, this is the gap that I see. This is the business need that I see. And I'm the perfect person to bridge that gap. And he said, "All right, write up that job description and we'll give it to HR." And I did. So that's the first one. But I want to break this down though, because what did it take? It took things like doing excellent work, knowing what I wanted, knowing the business needs, being able to advocate for myself, being my authentic self, using my voice, right? Expanding my network, all of those things. So think about those factors too when you think about creating your own position. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love that story. Good for you. Good for you. Again, I'm seeing so many examples of how you model the messaging that you share with audiences that you find yourself in front of. And so I do want to bring into the conversation those who may not have the level of boldness that Tiana has, someone who's flown a F-15 fighter jet, and maybe they really are at a place to where I'm going to trust the system. I'm going to do good work as you've communicated, and I'm going to hope that people will notice the good work that I'm doing and then present the opportunities. What would you say to those individuals?
I would say, I commend you for wanting to trust the system. And I hope that things are getting better. And that's why I love organizations like Nika White Consulting, right? Because they're on the front lines trying to help companies in those efforts, right? However, you have the ultimate responsibility for your career. I can't even tell you how many times people have reached out to me, men and women, and they'd asked me to be their sponsor or their mentor. And it's almost like their goal was to get me to say yes. Because after I said yes, it's like they disappeared. It's like, I don't know if there was an intimidation. They had no plan. They didn't know what to do next, right? You have to know what you want. You've got to take some time to really think about that. And you have to get in the driver's seat and control and navigate your career from there. It would be great if we can keep our heads down and just be discovered. But if I asked you all right now to type in the chat window how often that hasn't worked for you, I bet there would be a lot of people who said it didn't work for them. So you have to actually voice what it is you want. I'll give you a story. I was going through some issues with some poor leadership. And one of the things that you must be willing to do when I say take matters into your hands and take control, sometimes you have to know things aren't going to get better, and you're not going to just wait around and let them continue to stress you and right, just make things right. So you've got to go. And so I was in a situation where I was like, all right, I need to move on, get a new role. And I'm interviewing for this role, and I'm asking for a promotion in addition to taking the role, right? Okay. So long story short, they weren't able to make the promotion happen. But I'm still advocating for myself. And I'm saying, okay, so then I also want executive coaching. I want additional pay, right? So I'm still doing the advocacy work. And I already made it known that I'm expecting a promotion. So now when I get into this role and I knock it out of the park, what do you think I'm talking about along the way, but then also at performance review? I'm circling back to that promotion that we talked about. And I'm happy to say it took about a year, but the promotion did come. And when it did, this is what's funny. When I said I wanted the promotion, I let them know that I felt I was 2 levels behind. So when the promotion came and my manager was like, I'm so happy to report that we were able to get the promotion done. And I'm so excited. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited too. Now let's talk about the next promotion, because remember, I was 2 levels behind. So you always gotta make sure that your leadership knows where you're going so that they can help you to get there. Because if you don't expect them to just know what you want.
Yeah. So there's a couple takeaways in what you just shared. First and foremost, we have to know what we want. And I do find that to be so critical. I have a number of people that will come to me and it's like, will you be my mentor? I want you to help me kind of navigate upward mobility. What should I be thinking about? What conversation should I be having? And so sometimes my first question is, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
And oftentimes people can't answer that. And I'm like, until you get clear on that, it's going to be hard for anyone, whether it's your internal support system, external support system, to help you. So know what you want. And this is also a really good talking point for those in this community today who have people that rely on you to maybe help coach and guide and mentor them, especially those who are part of what I like to say underinvested populations, right? Those underserved, underestimated populations, because that's where usually the greatest disparity exists. And then the second thing is that I want to highlight that you talked about is sometimes we have to force ourselves to those necessary endings, right? There's a book, and I want my colleagues to place this into the chat because I think this could be a great resource for this full community, but it's called Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud. And regardless of what those necessary endings are that we could be contemplating, and we need enough confidence to start activating those necessary endings, that's important. And as you were telling your stories, it sounded as though there was a realization that if the stars do not align and I'm not hearing what I feel like I need to hear in order to continue on this path, I may have to activate a necessary ending. And sometimes I think we get stuck and feel like we don't have any choices. And I think that that perception of lack of power is to our demise. And so I wanted to share that.
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
always have. We always have a choice. Yes.
Yeah. So Kavana has a really good question in the chat that people are feeling some energy around. And his question is, how do you balance the thought of going above and beyond and getting pimped for your talent?
I love that question.
It's a good question.
It's a great question. So I'm super strategic, very intentional. I've been in those situations where we're asked to do these stretch assignments, right? And it's like, is it really a stretch assignment for me? Because a stretch assignment for me is something that is going to give me some type of extra skill set, some type of different networks. But if it's, sometimes I've questioned, is this a stretch assignment? Or is this just like, you don't have budget and you don't have head count to do the thing that you need to get done? So you pretty much want to volunteer to come do this for free, right? So you just have to be very intentional about what's the quid pro quo? Like, what am I getting from this experience? Because sometimes it is good to take on some extra work, right? If there is, like you said, if there's an end game for you in that, right? And sometimes it's not. So I like to do excellent work, and whatever my role is, I want to ensure that I'm doing it excellently, because that's my ticket to entry, right? When I'm doing excellent work, that's like, now I'm known, like I'm branding myself in that process, right? But no, I don't think that you should just go, pimp your work out for the highest bidder, just because someone thinks that it'd be good for you to do extra work.
No, I love that. I was part of a women's executive leadership session yesterday, and this topic came up, and it was really in the context of, we want to be collaborators. We want to make sure that we are pulling our weight and we are contributing at a high level. But how do you balance the need of putting it all out there and the worry that, yes, we do live in a society, especially where people that are underinvested, underestimated, those underrepresented populations, often the credit is not given to them for their ideas. And this is what one of the women coach in that session said, and it really stuck with me. She said, we have to realize that collaboration has many different levels, right? Some of us, when we enter into those collaborative environments and initiatives, we provide the whole dinner. Whereas maybe you should be providing just the appetizer, right? And I thought that was so rich, because I think that you're right. And I think it goes back to Tiana, especially if we put it in context of marginalized professionals, our need to try to feel like we have to always prove ourselves. And that becomes so exhausting. And sometimes it leads to the propensity for people to take our ideas, and have our talent pimped, as Kobina shared. But I'm loving this conversation, and I think that it's a real situation.
I think just to add to that, because you talked about people taking our ideas, I think another piece of that is that you have to own your story. You have to own that narrative, and you have to make sure other people know that narrative, and they know the impact that you're making in the role that you're playing.
No, I believe that. And there's a follow-up question as well on this same topic. So what is the conversation to be had leading into that extra work?
So I'm assuming this is someone can maybe they come off mute and just.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, and wonderful to meet you, Tiana. Did I say that right, Tiana?
Tiana.
All right. With a name like Kwabna, I try and get other people's names right. So when you talked about, you gave really good insights on, hey, look, you need to make sure that it's leading into the right direction, make sure that it's going to, if it is a stretch, being named a stretch assignment, then it should be a stretch assignment, and you should be gaining a skill or access to a network or something along those lines. How do you have that conversation? For example, say that I'm really good at recruiting, and my role is more consulting, but now I'm being asked to do the work as opposed to just consulting on the work, and use my networks and all those things to help the organization, which, is a great thing. And as a person, you don't have a problem with it, but over time, you're not getting the promotions or things that you should be getting because of the networks, the work that you're putting in, the asset that you are to the organization. How do you have that conversation? Like, look, stop pimping me, recognize my greatness, and keep me moving.
Lots to unpack there. Okay. First off, it is getting super clear about what you would like the situation to look like and to be. So for example, if you say, I'm really, really good at recruiting, but I want to be consulting, that makes me think about the difference between being in your zone of excellence and in your zone of genius, right? Because you can do something excellently well, but you can also get burned out. You could get unfulfilled doing that thing that, you might be excellent at it. Whereas your zone of genius is, of course, I don't know all the ins and outs, but it sounds like you like to be able to consult and to help strategize, like that type of thing, and not necessarily do the doing, right? And so I think it really just comes down to having, that's actually from a book, The Zone of Genius. What's the author's name? Guy, I'll get the name for you. So it sounds like it's really a conversation with leadership to say, like, this is where I want to go. And this is what my expectation is. And this is what I'm going to have that agreement on. This is what I'm going to deliver to get to that next level. I'll tell you a story I learned from Sally Krawcheck. She is the CEO of Ellevest. She was major executive. I think it was Bank of America. Wonderful woman. You should check her out. So she tells this story of Guy Hendricks. Thank you. She tells this story of having she's got two employees. Let's call them Mary and John. Okay, she's got Mary and John. And the beginning of the year, John comes into her office, and John is like, all right, I want a $10,000 bonus this year. And she's like, what? You want a $10,000 bonus? Okay. He's like, yep, these are the expectations for me. I'm going to knock them out of the park, and then I'm going to want the $10,000 bonus. Okay. And then Mary, she doesn't come in and she doesn't really ask for anything. End of the year comes. she's got this bonus. It's time now, right, to divvy up this bonus. She only has a $10,000 budget. So she doesn't want to give John the entire thing. So she has to think about that, like, okay, well, John did come in and say exactly what he planned to do, and he actually did it. He has had his door closed these past few weeks, and I know that firm down the street has been courting him, right? And so they're like, okay, we can't give John the entire 10, but I'll tell you what, we'll give him 7, and we'll give Mary 3. And the moral of that story is, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about the manager that I had, is that you have to let it be known what your expectations are. And if you're doing the great work that you're doing to where they want you to keep doing it and they want you to use your resources, it's like, yeah, and so this is my expectation. You can also come at it from an angle of, okay, these are all the things that I'm doing. If you want me to also do these things, what are we going to free up from this thing so that I can do those things? Or should we bring in another head count to do those things? You know, so it's like just kind of getting clear on what you want the outcome to be, and then leading the horse to where you want them to go. Does that help?
I'm seeing his head nod, so I'm thinking that means absolutely yes.
Yes. It's helpful. I think it's interesting because it's in my space and my organization, I get to have a lot of conversations with people. People enjoy talking to me, so they share stories. So this platform, and Dr. Nika, I appreciate you having this platform because I get to ask a lot of questions to help make sure that people are taken care of.
And there's value in that. There's value in your relationships and your influence. And that is part of that negotiation.
Yeah. Thank you, Pavna. We appreciate your questions each week. So thank you. So I want to remind the audience that if you have questions for Tiana, then we are certainly going to give you an opportunity to present those. You can just prepare momentarily to unmute yourself live and share, or you can place them into the chat if you want to have your questions presented for you. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. So I mentioned in your bio that you have been working with Sochi Circle, and I want you to share a little bit more about that. Tell us how your work with Sochi Circle empowers the next generation who will soon be entering these corporate spaces that we're talking about, with all of the complexities of the challenges that, you know, are going to evolve when they find themselves actually in those environments. And so tell us about your work there.
Absolutely. That is the whole point. You're spot on. So Sochi Circle, to take a step back, I created Sochi Circle a few years ago for a few reasons. One, I'm a mom of 4, 3 girls, and lack of representation in the media content, lack of positive storytelling and not just slapstick comedy and tokenism was a problem for me. Lack of, these kids go to school and they're being bullied for their race. This isn't just a corporate thing, okay? These are little children going to school being bullied for their race, their hair, all kinds of things.
Right.
And I said, what are we going to do about this? Because yeah, I can write some letters to all the major networks and don't get a response, or I can be the change that I want to see. And so with no filmmaking experience whatsoever, working at Microsoft in a sales job, which was extremely crazy, I came up with the idea that we have to do video because, so another part of my background, you mentioned being a nonprofit founder. So years ago, I worked with Susan L. Taylor from Essence Magazine. She was editor-in-chief emeritus for like 30 something years, right? She left Essence to start the National Cares Mentoring Movement, which is a recruitment agency really to recruit mentors for our underserved youth. What I discovered in that I launched the San Antonio chapter of that organization. And what I discovered is that you've got organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters, and they have these long waiting lists of children who are waiting to get paired up with a mentor because adults are not really signing up for that job. So they're lacking the mentorship. And so I'm just thinking like, okay, how can we change the model? Right. And then a lot of different, iterations in my mind. I said, okay, video is a scalable model. I can create a web series and I can reach girls all over the world with this information. So created that. We ended up winning, like literally we finished post-production. We filmed in LA. We finished post-production and we ended up winning a Hollywood Film Festival and also being acknowledged as the modern day Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood by a film critic. And so I've been having these, going out to different schools and screening Sochi Circle and having conversations with students, middle school students, elementary school students about confidence, about resilience, about inclusion, about diversity. The cast of this show represents, African-American girls with locks and afros in the, of their hair, Mexican, Vietnamese, Chinese, Indian, so Pakistani Muslim, a girl with disability. We really wanted to show representation that reflects the world that we actually live in and give children a sense of appreciation for the diversity of these beautiful cultures that make up our world. And I truly believe that that is what's needed to stop the cycles of what we're experiencing today in corporate. These girls, these children, they're the next leaders. They're the next business leaders. Do we want to keep having these same conversations year over year? Like, I hope not. And so that is what I'm doing. That is my goal, is that we don't keep the cycle going, that we actually have conversations with our young people about inclusion at an early age.
I love it. And you're getting lots of love and affirmation and support in the chat from this community.
About that.
Yes, lots of love. You're being called a powerhouse, and also people are admiring your artwork. And we did that before we went live today. We talked about all the artwork in the background, and yes, it is fabulous. So thank you. She did share with us that they're different artists, but so maybe, after today, when you get her contact information, which we will share in the follow-up email, she'll share with you who those artists are. But so here's a question that is coming in right now. And what advice do you have for a mother of young girls to go against the social grain and start being cognizant of what it means to advocate for yourself?
Well, you can go to Sochi Circle, you can watch the episodes for free, and you can get a conversation guide. I'll tell you that. But also,
we do have all the links, by the way, into the chat.
Yes. But also it's a lot of conversation and role modeling. I've got my two oldest are 15 and 12. And a lot of conversation and role modeling. I talk to them about the things that I see. I talk to them about my own experiences, and I talk to them about how I went through them, right? And I'm modeling as best that I can. I'm catching things in the moment. The other thing I would say is that when you think about technology today, as parents, it goes back to what you said before, Dr. Nika, about the power that we have. We're the parents. So when my children got cell phones at ages, I think they were 9 and 12, guess what? All the parental controls, that phone is not to leave the main floor of the house. It does not go upstairs. It does not go downstairs. I'm monitoring what's going on. And if I see anything I'm bringing up, let's have a conversation about this. And that's one of the things. So with Sochi Circle, when I go to the schools and I screen it and we have a conversation, there is an episode of a girl whose parents do not allow her to have a cell phone. And all of her friends at ballet, they have a phone. So they make fun of her. They're bullying her. And her parents say, you can't have a phone until you're 16. Okay. And so I use this as a launch pad for conversation with these children. What I'm finding when I go to these schools, no one's having these conversations with the girls. That's why I keep saying that word, conversation. They're not having a conversation. So when I go to the schools, the teachers are like, we can never get this girl to talk in class. And she comes to your session and she just won't stop talking. I'm like, yeah, because they're not having a conversation anywhere else. And I once had a seventh grader. I had fifth graders, sixth graders, and seventh graders in one session. The fifth graders are watching the episode, and I always ask, I'm like, okay, so who has a cell phone? Raise your hands, and then it's very interesting to see the hands that go up, and based on socioeconomic status too. When I go to the inner cities and I screen social circle versus the suburb charter schools and the most affluent schools, it's very interesting. But anyway, so I had a seventh grader who said, listen, I know all you fifth graders are saying you want a phone. However, she's like, I've had my phone since like second grade. She said, and I have an addiction and I am trying to break this addiction. And so I want you to just be careful what you ask for. And it's like, man, I don't know if a parent can get through to them the same way a peer can too, And so that's why I try to create these spaces to have those conversations. But just to summarize, to recap, you got to try to have the conversations. You got to exercise your power as a parent. And you do have this new resource that you can leverage as well.
We love it. And again, we've even placed a toolkit for parents, caregivers from Social Circle into the chat as well. So this next question actually comes from Jonathan Hawk. So thank you, Jonathan, for your question. And I'm assuming that since you placed it into the chat, you want me to present it for you. So I will at this time. How can some of your sharing that you're sharing today, Tiana, be applied to greater society? This individual, Jonathan, is retired. So he wants to know, how can this be applied to the greater society?
How can what I'm sharing today be applied to greater society?
And if I'm reading that correctly, and Jonathan, if you would like to unmute yourself to clarify, we would very much welcome that. But I think that by the context of sharing that he's retired, it's a lot of what we've shared today is like within the workplace, but how can individuals who really just want to, outside of the workplace environment, help to foster some of the teachings and the sharing that you are presenting today?
Oh, lovely. Yeah, so there's obviously the workplace. We talked about our youth. I'm just a big proponent of ensuring that we are passing this knowledge down, to the next generations. So that's going to be key. In our homes, having these conversations in our daily lives, so much about what we're saying about advocacy, about knowing what you want. It's really not even a workplace thing. It's like you have to first do that for yourself. Then it shows up in spaces like workplace, or even if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, it shows up in those places. But you first have to do it for yourself, right? If you have, let's say you have friends, and I don't know if you guys see this, but a lot of times we like to commiserate. We want to get together. We want to talk about all the bad stuff that's going on. Even if something great happened, we're like, yeah, I got this. People are like, yo, you got this amazing opportunity. You won this great award. Yeah, I won this great award, but now I got to go travel somewhere to get the award. I mean, it's just like, couldn't they just mail it to me? I mean, it's like, we just have so much like commisery. And so it's like, when we see that stuff, like, not cut it out, like say, no, you better celebrate that accomplishment. Let's cheer each other on. When we do that in our daily lives, that is what's going to show up in these other external places. So I think that's what we can do from a greater society standpoint. It's just like, look how we're showing up in our own daily lives. Yeah, speak that positivity.
Yeah, so Jonathan is confirming that we did interpret his question correctly. So he's
Okay.
appreciative of your answer. That is great. So I want to open up the floor. We do have a little less than 10 minutes left, and I have maybe one or two more questions, but I want to reserve those just in case someone in this community is really feeling emboldened to present your question live. So we'll pause for a second. And if that is you, then certainly just feel free to unmute yourself at this time and share. Okay, Well, hearing none, be sure to raise your hand. I'm paying close attention to that. I have another question for you, Tiana.
Okay.
And this question relates to, we talk a lot about time management, change management, but I really believe that we need to spend more time being intentional about energy management. So what are the strategies that you leverage for managing your energy?
Great question. Let me tell you. I have coined the term proactive equity in resilience. What is that? That means I am not, people think of resilience as being reactive. Resilience is every time I ask the kids too, I'm like, what is resilience to you all? Oh, it's how you bounce back from a setback. No, it's not. It's how you proactively keep your energy high so that you have the stamina to manage stress when it comes, because it will inevitably come, but can you manage it? And so one of the ways that I do that is like you said, I protect my energy. I protect, what am I, like I say, you are what you eat. Like what am I consuming?
Right.
What am I consuming? I'm not just talking about food, but I am talking about food because I don't natural, organic
food, content, people, relationships,
it's all that. It's like I'm not no shade if you are, because we all get our entertainment from different places, but all that rah ooh, that's not for me, because it gets into your spirit. The music we listen to, the people we hang around. I don't tolerate any foolishness. I don't care if you're a family member. I don't care if you were a best friend. Another thing is, in the spirit of foolishness, is making sure that you're setting boundaries. Set those boundaries, enforce those boundaries.
Yeah.
Set and enforce those boundaries. Another thing is, ghosting. That's a big thing today. Somebody made you upset, you just ghost them. I don't have to, if I'm not answering your calls. Oh, no. I'm gonna have that conversation with you about what just happened, because if I don't, it wears on me. It wears on my spirit. And you don't even know that you offended me. You just off doing your own thing. You're like, oh, she don't even call. She's not answering my calls. You think something's wrong with me. The narrative gets changed, right? Yeah. So it's the boundaries, it's what you're consuming, it's making sure you keep high energy people around you. If you have people around you that can't stand to hear your good news, you might want to rethink that relationship. So all of those things.
I love it. Energy management. Let's make it something that's intentional. Develop those strategies to manage your energy, and you've given us some great practical tips there. So another question that I often like to ask of our guest co-host is, we talk a lot about the need to be reflective about our legacy. What legacy do we want to leave? And obviously, it sounds like you're someone, just based upon all that you've accomplished, that your legacy is critically important as well. But I want to shift that question a little bit, and I want to ask it this way. How do you want people to experience you? How do you want people to experience Tiana?
That's a good one. Let's see. I guess I want people to definitely feel comfortable around me. I'm very candid. I don't want to say I'm an open book, but I'm very just, what you see is what you get. That is my authenticity, coming through. I'm the person that celebrates people, if you can't already tell, right? And I always want to make that space for people. I'm the person on LinkedIn where when you're posting about something great you did, I'm like, yes, congratulations, because I want to continue to encourage people to advocate for themselves, to put that out there and let's celebrate them. I also want people to feel like they can be their authentic selves around me. And a lot of the work I do with Social Circle is just around that. I don't know. Is that answering the question, or do I need to go?
There is not a right or wrong to that question. Someone actually presented that question in a circle that I was a part of recently. And just to hear the responses of people and how in which they decided to address that question was so eye-opening for me. But I think it's an important question for each of us to be reflective about as we think about ourselves and how people experience us. How do we want people to experience us? I think that's also a part of the continuation of the discussion of what do we want our legacy to be, right?
Yeah,
So anyway,
I love it.
No.
I want people to also, I want to empower people to have that bold audacity too, you know, like I sometimes I like to give extra energy so that people give that permission to others too, you know?
Yeah, well, it can become contagious. And so I like that. So I'm going to try to squeeze in 1 to 2 more questions because we have some folks that may have been sitting back and percolating on what questions they wanted to present. And I'm now going to open up the floor for Amy Pecoraro to present her question to you, Tiana.
Okay.
Tiana, I have a quick question. You were talking about being proud of what it is that you do. And I've always struggled with that because I go, well, I don't want to appear bragging and be overly like proud of what it is I do. And so I find a lot of times that just keeps my voice inside and I don't say anything. So how do you balance that between being proud of the things that you do, but being aware that you're not like bragging and I don't know. I would love to know what you think about that.
So here's the thing. My self-advocacy to me, which some people may call bragging, it's not arrogance to me, it's influence. Self-advocacy is influence. We have to influence the situations around us. I'm going to brag, if you want to call it that, not necessarily to brag, but I want people to just have the permission to know you went through these things, you've done some amazing things, and you earn that right to acknowledge it. I feel like God has given us gifts, right? He's given us gifts. To me, if I keep silent on how I have taken my gifts and made an impact through the gifts that I am given, if I just go bury that in the sand, it's not honoring the gifts that I'm giving. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And then I think when other women see me do that, or other people see me do that, I want them to feel like they have permission to do that as well. Especially in a work setting, right? Because when people don't know what you do, it's just, think about it. And I know, you know, you're an entrepreneur, Amy, but speaking to some of the others, if let's say a leader in your business, you just hope one day that they'll notice you and you'll climb the ranks. I don't know what I did this morning. So how am I going to know the impact you made this quarter? You gotta find a way to get that information to me, because people won't know that, you know? One of the things that I've done, I hope I'm not going too long in this answer, but one of the things that I've created this, it's called an autobio, an audacious bio. It's a 1-slider, like a 1-page. And it's to Dr. Nika's point, it is not a regurgitation of my resume. It is not a breakdown of my job description. It is, who is Tiana the woman, right? And it is an amazing exercise to do because it forces you to really think about the answer to that question, and put it together in a succinct way that really tells who you really are. And I use that. If I have a potential mentor or potential sponsor that I want to connect with, I'll send that ahead of time and they'll be able to read and learn a little bit more about me. You know, it also says, put some respect on my name. And it makes me put some respect on my name too, because if you think about it, sometimes you don't even know the amazingness that you've done because you don't talk about it. Then when you sit and you look at it, you actually look at it, you're like, wow, I've been given some gifts and I've made an impact. And why not be proud to share that and help others? So that's my take on it.
I love it. Thank you so much for the question, Amy. And Tiana, you nailed it. You're, again, getting some great affirmations into the chat. Michael says, capability without visibility means no one knows it. Yes, 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 absolutely. And I think it's also about the context in which you're sharing this information, but also I believe that reframing can be so essential as well. And what I mean by reframing, instead of seeing it as now I'm bragging on myself, no, you're telling facts of your success. It ain't bragging if you did and if it happened, right? So think about it that way, but it's a great question. I'm sure that others found value in being able to hear the responses to it. So we are out of time, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because Tiana, I could sit here and keep talking to you for at least another hour. This has been so rich. And I so appreciate you saying yes to our invite. We're going to make sure that this community knows how to reach out to you, how to follow the work that you're doing. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the work that you're doing with Socio Circle. Soci Circle is amazing. And we just look forward to following your success. Thank you all for being here today. We will follow up with the replay email as well as some of the great nuggets that came from today's conversation. We hope that you will pass it along if this was valuable to you and join us again next week. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And thank you so much. Stay healthy.
Thank you for having
happy.
me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.